A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking about what went on at the White House yesterday. The vice president hosting about 100 or so state lawmakers as part of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, touting model legislation for storage mandates, for lost or stolen reporting requirements, and encouraging these state lawmakers to enact a host of additional gun control measures, everything from banning so-called assault weapons to enshrining red flag laws. We'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, let's talk about this for just a second. Biden's America, it is crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink, as you well know. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. Truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco, so you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, thousands of five-star reviews, and they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you contact them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. So I wrote about this at Bearing Arms yesterday. The confab with the vice president and these state lawmakers. And, but I want to focus on a couple of aspects of this. One, it was pretty savvy of the White House to invite all of these state lawmakers because not only did they get some national coverage, but again, they got a lot of local coverage, right? Because now you can tailor these stories to individual state representatives or state senators, or in the case of what we're going to be talking about primarily today, the mayor of Kansas City, right? So you get headlines like this one: Kansas City mayor meets with White House officials on gun violence as city nears homicide record. So they got a lot of bang for their buck, right? By inviting these state legislators to go to the White House. It really amplified the media coverage that they received. But what exactly is going to come of this? Again, most of the lawmakers, in fact, I would say almost all of the lawmakers who were invited to the White House are already supportive of the anti-gun proposals coming from the Biden administration, right? So it's not like they really learned anything. I saw a lot of headlines yesterday talking about, roundtable discussions and looking for ways to combat gun violence. This was a very top-down discussion, right? I mean, this came about with the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. You had the DOJ get involved. They released, again, model legislation for storage mandates, for lost and stolen reporting requirements, that if, again, you are the victim of a crime, your firearm gets stolen. If you don't report that immediately to police, then you become a criminal yourself, right? All of those strategies were already in place. It's not like anybody came up with a new idea yesterday. This is about promoting the same tired, stale gun control policies that they've been pushing to enact in some cases for decades. But there's also, again, another narrative here, right? And that is that the only way to combat violent crime is through more gun control. And that's, again, what the mayor of Kansas City was talking about. Mayor Quentin Lucas met with the White House on Wednesday over a proposed federal rule expanding background checks and other steps to control gun violence as the city approaches a record number of homicides in 2023. The visit comes after Kansas City's 177th homicide of the year over the weekend, just shy of the 2020 record of 182 killings. As city officials look for solutions to the violence, they've often been hamstrung by loose state gun laws enacted by the Republican-controlled General Assembly. That type of reporting, which comes from the Kansas City Star, is indicative of the type of anti-gun media bias that we see all the time, right? You've got a mayor complaining, not just about violent crime, but again, about how he's hamstrung by Republicans, in this case, in the state capital of Missouri, right? Who have all of these, quote unquote, lax gun laws and are ignoring violent crime. The problem with that narrative is that if you look at what's going on with violent crime in the state's two biggest cities, Kansas City and St. Louis, they're two very different pictures. According to the latest homicide statistics in Kansas City, murders have risen by about 4% this year compared to last. Meanwhile, homicides in St. Louis have fallen by 25% compared to last year. And across the country, it looks like 2023 could actually be if not a record-setting year for declines in homicide, pretty darn close to a record-setting year. Nationwide, it looks like homicides are going to be down by more than 10%, which is very good news. So Kansas City and cities like Washington, D.C. and Seattle, Memphis, these are outliers. Jeff Asher, who's a crime analyst I talk about quite a bit at Bearing Arms. I think he does a really good job of just reporting on the data. He had a post a couple of days ago where he talked about, I think it was somewhere around 75%. It might have been 73, it might have been 76, but it was somewhere around 75% of the cities that he's been keeping track of in the year-to-date homicide totals. About 3 and 4 of those cities have actually seen declines in homicides compared to last year. And it looks like violent crime overall is declining this year as well, which is, again, very good news. Bad news for gun control advocates who, are basically wedded to this belief that more guns equals more crime. If that was the case, crime would be going up each and every year, right? Because there are more and more firearms sold each and every year, more and more Americans embracing their right to keep and bear arms. But more guns does not equal more crime. It is more complicated than that. Again, we're seeing an increase in homicides in some cities that have very restrictive gun control laws, like Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, you're seeing, homicides increase in a couple of cities that don't have very restrictive gun control laws, like Memphis. But we're also seeing violent crime drop in most other cities. Baltimore, Maryland, for example, this could be the first year since 2015 that Baltimore has fewer than 300 homicides. I mean, that is a remarkable turnaround. It happened, by the way, the same year that shall issue right to carry actually came to Maryland for the first full 12-month period, right? Bruin came down last summer, but this is the first calendar year, that Maryland residents have been able to apply for and receive a concealed carry license without having to demonstrate a justifiable need. Again, according to gun control activists, that should have meant more violent crime, more shootings in Baltimore. And instead, homicides are dropping by a significant margin. The only reason I bring this up is because these simple narratives just don't work. I mean, as we talked about this with John Diedrich from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on Monday of this week, right? And that was one of the takeaways from his 9 months of reporting on this series Behind the Gun, is that there are no simple solutions. It's not a matter of, well, if we just pass this law over here, if we just enshrine this gun control policy over there, then everything gets solved, right? Again, when you look at what's taking place in cities across the country, what you are seeing is that there is a small number of individuals who are responsible for a disproportionate amount of violent crime. And if you can focus your attention on those individuals, then you can have dramatic results in terms of stopping shootings, not just homicides, but non-fatal shootings as well. In fact, I've got a piece coming up at Bearing Arms later today talking about the new Attorney General-elect in Kentucky who's going to be doing this very thing in conjunction with officials in Louisville. And it's a carrot and stick approach. We've talked about this on the program before. Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of Virginia, was on this program not long ago talking about Operation Ceasefire, which does exactly what I just talked about. You identify the most violent and prolific offenders and those who are at risk of becoming the most violent and prolific offenders, and you offer them a choice. You're going to stop shooting. One way or the other, you're going to stop shooting. We'll help you if you let us. We'll make sure that you can get your GED. If you need counseling, we'll provide it. We're going to get you job training. We're going to give you the tools you need to chart a new course in life. But if you turn that down, if you do not accept the opportunity that's been given you, then we're going after you. We're going to kick your cases up to federal court. We're not going to allow you to plea bargain them down. You're not going to get probation. You're not going to get parole. You're going to get stiff sentences, and you'll have to do those sentences before you're released. This is nothing new. The strategy dates back to the late 1990s, but it works. When you have stakeholders who can work together, right? And that's local law enforcement, state law enforcement, federal law enforcement, as well as community members. When you have all of those groups operating in conjunction with one another, and they're not, fighting for attention, they're not fighting for headlines, but they're actually working together, then yes, amazing things can happen. Homicide rates can drop by 50% or more. But again, it's not through more gun control. It's not through what the mayor of Kansas City is calling for. Specifically, by the way, Mayor Lucas is interested in this new ATF rule, proposed rule, on who is engaged in the business of selling firearms. And the Kansas City Star does a really poor job of reporting this. They write, federal law requires businesses selling guns to conduct background checks on buyers, but many gun sales online and at gun shows aren't covered. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives wants to expand the definition of business to cover more firearm dealers. That's not really what's going on here. Under current federal law, everybody, every FFL, right, has to put their buyer through a background check. Doesn't matter if it's at a gun show, doesn't matter if it's online, doesn't matter if it's at a brick and mortar store. If you have a federal firearms license, you are required to put your buyers through a background check. So this rule is actually expanding who would be defined as engaged in the business, right? Who would have to get a federal firearms license? Kansas City Star reports that the ATF estimates as few as 24,500 people to as many as 328,000 other people could be affected by the rule. I would say it's actually much larger than that, because this rule is so broad, as we've talked about earlier this week on the program, it is almost impossible for you to figure out if you are engaged in the business. So either you're going to stop doing private transfers, right? Okay, I don't get dinged. I don't want to be subject to a federal prosecution. Or you're going to apply for your FFL under the theory that better safe than sorry, right? Because the ATF doesn't really give you a hard or fast definition of when you are engaged in the business. They've said you don't even have to complete a sale to be considered engaged in the business. Just offering a firearm for sale might trip you up. You don't have to sell a firearm at a profit, as long as you're offering that firearm for sale. And you don't even need to do it on a repetitive basis, which has been one of the attributes of what makes somebody engaged in the business, right? The repetitive buying and selling of firearms. ATF says, nah, not anymore. You could offer as little as one firearm for sale. And again, that sale doesn't even have to be completed, but the ATF might still consider you to be engaged in the business. And you could still be subject to, again, prison time, huge amounts of fines, if you engage in that private transfer without getting an FFL, which is a lengthy and cumbersome process. This is about, again, trying to impose as close to a universal background check system as possible, but it is also about trying to chill the rights of gun owners and curtail their ability to privately transfer firearms. Lucas told the Kansas City Star, in Kansas City, we are constrained at the state and local level. We need to look to tools from our federal partners. But again, if that's the case, then why are homicides down by 25% in St. Louis while they're up by 4% in Kansas City? Is St. Louis operating under the same constraints as Kansas City, right? I mean, they're both big cities in Missouri. They have firearms preemption laws in place. Permitless carry, same gun laws apply. So why are homicides going down in St. Louis and continue to increase in Kansas City? I would say it's not because of the gun laws. There's something else going on. Now, I haven't taken a look at crime in Kansas City in depth. I don't know where the failings are. I don't know what the strategies are being used by the Kansas City Police Department. I don't know if they're focused on those most violent offenders. I don't know what the homicide clearance rate is. I don't know. But I do know that it is too simplistic, far too simplistic, to suggest that the answer is simply more federal gun control legislation. There was one other item from the Kansas City Star that I wanted to point out in their coverage of this meeting between the Kansas City mayor and the White House yesterday. And I wrote about this as my VIP piece for Bearing Arms on Wednesday. Camala Harris, talking to the lawmakers there. And she said, quote, "We're up against some who would suggest a false choice. That is, you are either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away." Now, this is a straw man argument that Camala Harris has constructed going back before she was even vice president. The earliest instance I can find of her saying almost this exact phrase is 2019, when she was running to become the Democratic nominee. Apparently, she really likes that phrase because she has repeated it almost ad nauseum every time she talks about firearms. It's a great straw man, right? If you don't support what we're doing, well, you must think that we're trying to take your guns away. And we're not doing that. I support the Second Amendment, she said. But what does that support actually look like? What does it look like? What does that mean to her when she says, I support the Second Amendment? This is a individual who signed on to an amicus brief in Heller when she was the district attorney in San Francisco, urging the Supreme Court to uphold Washington, D.C.'s ban on handguns, saying that, for 70 years, the courts have basically said that there is no individual right to keep and bear arms. And if that's the case, then the Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban doesn't violate anybody's rights. That's what she argued. When she was in the Senate, she supported a ban on so-called assault weapons. Obviously now, she's supporting a ban on so-called assault weapons. Camala Harris talks a lot about, again, she's repeated this phrase multiple times. I support the Second Amendment, but I also support a ban on so-called assault weapons. So what does support for the Second Amendment actually mean to Camala Harris? I don't know. But I would love for somebody in the D.C. press corps to actually drill down a little bit and ask some questions, because I want to know the answer. I want to know when somebody who supports a gun ban, who believes that handguns can be banned without violating anybody's constitutional rights, when they say they support the Second Amendment, I think that's deserving of a little bit more exploration, don't you? Rather than just allowing the vice president to repeatedly offer the trite and tired phrase without actually digging into the intent or the meaning behind it. All right, let's turn our attention now to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there. A story out of Orlando, Florida, where a man accused of killing a 15-year-old in Orlando has a criminal history dating back to 2015. That's troubling enough, but the real issue is what happened the last time he was in trouble with the law. According to Channel 9, WFTV in Orlando, the man who is accused of killing 15-year-old Destin Webster Thompson back in October is a guy named Argardo Francois, 30 years old. And WFTV investigated his, quote, lengthy criminal history. And among the charges that he has faced, found a prior arrest for gun possession as a convicted felon in 2021, 2 years ago. According to the news station, Francois' sentencing score sheet, which was signed by a judge, shows that the minimum time he was required to serve was 3 years. It has not been 3 years since Francois was sentenced. And they spoke with Orange Osceola County State Attorney Andrew Bain, who said he should have been in custody for at least 36 months. So already we've got an issue here, right? Because 36 months, last time I checked, is not 3 years. That's a year and a half. So again, we're dealing with basically 1 day off your sentence for every day behind bars that you don't get in trouble, commit a major violent felony. Andrew Bain says because you had to serve that day for day, that's 3 years from 2021, and that would give us a community of breakthroughs the next year in 2024. So he should have been behind bars based on, again, that minimum sentence that he was supposed to receive. What happened? Well, Andrew Bain says that the previous state attorney allowed Francois to plead less than the minimum. Channel 9 found the plea negotiation agreement, and they confirmed that in the end, Francois was granted less than the mandatory minimum. He served less than a year behind bars for being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm and was released in May, 5 months before the 15-year-old was shot. Andrew Bain, the current state attorney, says the result of this was a 15-year-old child who lost his life. Francois, by the way, was also arrested this week for allegedly robbing and assaulting somebody with a weapon. That was when he was also arrested in connection with the death of the 15-year-old. Justin Thompson's funeral is later this month. And meanwhile, Francois, hopefully the days of these sweetheart plea deals are over. But again, why was this deal offered in the first place? Especially when somebody, again, has such a lengthy criminal history. Today's Armed Citizen story. From California, Pleasant Hill consignment store worker scares off robbers with a gun. That's a headline we might not actually have seen in California a couple of years ago, at least much less likely to see one. Thankfully, there are some folks who have undergone the bureaucratic gauntlet that it takes to exercise their right to keep and bear arms. One of them being 73-year-old Albert Marcoux, who did have a firearm on him when a group of robbers came into his store just the other day. He was able to scare them away. At least one of them was armed with a sledgehammer. So, they did pose a threat to life and limb. Happened Monday afternoon, about 4:20. Surveillance video shows a woman walking through the store, according to KTVU. And she was just kind of scoping out the place, right? So then she leaves and she's talking to the security guard, kind of stalling at the door. All of a sudden, her buddies come bum rushing into the store. Again, at least one of them with a sledgehammer in hand. They run over to the jewelry counter. Marcoux was headed over there as well because he heard one of the employees scream out. And so as the robbers are running to the jewelry counter, Marcoux gets there first. He pulls his revolver. And all of a sudden, the group figures out they've got somewhere else they need to be. And they turn and they run out the shop. They get into two cars, one of which was reported stolen. Actually, as they're getting into the cars, a Pleasant Hill police officer pulls up behind one of them because the white Infiniti that they were in had been reported stolen, and a license plate reader ended up hitting on it. Despite the fact that the police cruiser was right there, two cars sped away, and nobody's been in custody. Nobody's been arrested with this. Marcoux says that he is going to keep a hold of his firearm in case they or any other robbers come back. He says, if they threaten my life or the life of my employees, I'll use the gun 100%. He says that he has kept his revolver on him inside the store because of recent incidents that are similar to this. A week ago, there were two guys who smashed display cases, stole jewelry at a home consignment center in Danville. Marcoux says, I didn't want to shoot anybody, but I have to make a statement. Too many bad things have happened. Stores get robbed left and right. So hopefully the suspects here in Pleasant Hill, California will be taken into custody, but nothing else. Hopefully they have learned not to mess around with Albert Marcoux or his consignment store. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A police officer who several years ago saved a life and has stayed in touch and has become a part of that life that he saved. She's my little angel is the headline. North Haven police officer who saved baby's life becomes a part of her family. Again, I mean, and this isn't just a matter of being in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. This really is about the bond that first responders can have to the people that they help. And maybe there are some first responders who are able to, leave the job behind. They get off their shift and they turn the switch and that's it. But I don't think that's the case for a lot of first responders, whether we're talking about police officers, firefighters, paramedics. What they see and what they do on the job carries with them off the clock. And in this case, Detective Michael Harden of the North Haven Police Department in Connecticut really bonded with this little girl who he saved a few years ago. This little girl, name's Tuka. She was born prematurely. Her mom had taken her to with her to a movie theater, and she was just a few months old. And her mom, Nikki Huckabee, said, I went to pick her up when the movie was over, and I realized she wasn't breathing. And I was like, oh my God, I was hysterical. Michael Harden was in the theater that night, and he said, I saw Nicole running towards me with a little angel in her arms. He grabbed her, tried to revive her as much as he could, and he said she just went limp on me. And he's a certified EMT as well, but he had never worked on a child that small. He said the training kicked in, but I was petrified. I was nervous. Performed the Heimlich maneuver, abdominal thrusts, back blows. He says, I couldn't do anything, or she said, I couldn't do anything. The mom said, I couldn't do anything besides pray as she's watching the officer. And then Tuka took a breath and started crying. Harden says that cry was the best thing ever. He believes that she was choking on some mucus, but he was able to clear out her airways. He said, I almost started crying myself. And he talked about when he handed her over to paramedics. He said, I always remember when I put her on the stretcher, she was like a little bundle of joy crying. And I was exhausted for 2 weeks after that. Mike Harden is now Tuka's godfather. He showed up for her first day of school. He's there at the house delivering presents alongside his wife, Auntie Sue. And Uncle Mike Harden says, I will be there for her graduation and her wedding as well. As WTNH says, it's a moment that will always stand out in a 27-year career. And now Detective Harden lives with a little angel by his side. He said, unbeknownst to us, our family grew that day. Every time I see her, it's a great day. Tomorrow is going to be Tuka's 5th birthday. And Uncle Mike Harden will be there to celebrate. Again, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. And in doing so, changing multiple lives, including his own. So, Detective Mike Harden, we thank you for your very, very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program, as always. Just a slight programming note. I'm going to be off on Monday, so instead of a Monday through Thursday schedule next week, we'll go Tuesday through Friday. Won't miss any Bearing Arms Cam & Companies, but we will push them back a day. So hopefully that's all right with you. Until we talk again, thank you so much for being a part of the program. And don't forget to check out BearingArms.com. We'll be reporting on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation, keeping you covered and up to date. Until we talk again here at Bearing Arms Cam & Company, be well, be safe, and be free.